Welcome to Securely Speaking, a podcast where we explore the realms of governance, identity, security, and compliance. I'm Moritz, the head of marketing at Integralis, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to our very first podcast. Drawing from our extensive experiences and fueled by our unwavering passion, we aim to change the way you perceive and approach identity. So, get ready to embark on a new journey with us. Let's dive in with Quinton, Hughes and Almero Steyn as they discuss how frameworks allow you to achieve IGA success.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the second episode of Securely Speaking. Hey, Al, how are you doing?
Hey, Quinn. I am doing good, thank you. It looks like you're a little bit cold down there in Cape Town again today.
It is a chilly day in Cape Town. Can't wait for summer to arrive. It's cold and wet outside. I just took my beanie off. Otherwise, I look like a, criminal, I suppose. But it's chilly outside. Can't wait for summer. Yeah, looking forward to chatting to you again around IGA. And our topic for today being a framework discussion. I like frameworks.
Yeah, I think in the previous discussion we had a lot of back and forth around what are the things that makes a IGA project successful. And I think we identified that stakeholder engagement is really important. And then we kind of started touching on the requirements and figuring out what exactly it is that you want to do with the program when you start launching it. And I think we often find that frameworks, like the word says, helps us to frame the conversation well. I think oftentimes when I engage with customers, I see that they struggle to think, what is the scope of an IGA project? You know, where does it start? Where does it end? How should they tackle it? How do they break this elephant down into different pieces?
Exactly.
So I think today, what I really wanted us to have a discussion about is, well, how does frameworks help us do that? So how does a framework help us to kind of conceptualize what we're trying to do? And then how do we break it up to figure out, how do we create phases out of that maybe, or what's important to us or what's not important? And then I think finally, the thing that always comes up is, well, how do you map technology on top of that then? So if you know that this is what you want to do, I think it makes it easier. But how do you then go about to figure out what tech to use to get down this process and this journey?
Yeah, I think I always compare the use of frameworks. I recently did some renovations and I've built a house or so in my past life, unfortunately. But so a framework in my mind is really something that helps you get going and address the standards and the best practices and the governance and the rules of a technology or a service. So let's take an example. I mean, if you want to build a house, you get the framework sorted out, which tells you need a foundation. It needs to be this wide. It needs to be that. It gives you all the rules, right, to be able to build your house. But how you configure that house, what windows you put in, what doors you put in, how high the roof must be, those type of things, that's what you can bring to the table as a homeowner. And as a customer, when you utilize frameworks, thinking in that reference, when you start looking at IGA, big, complex IGA projects, utilizing a framework like that tells you what the best practice is, things that you should keep in mind, the processes out of the box that you can utilize. That really helps you get going quickly, and it latches on nicely to our previous topic, like you said, of getting a successful IGA project implemented at the corporate or at your business, right? So I think the best one I've seen, and there's quite a few frameworks out there. A lot of our partners that we work with have developed their own frameworks, and they are really, most of the time, very technology specific. One of our partners, Almero, have developed their own framework called Identity Process Plus framework. We'll give you the image and the links and the details to download it. That is really, of all the frameworks that we've worked with, Al, I think that's the best one that we've used. That is really technology agnostic. It allows us to really engage with business and focus with business before we even start talking technology. And what we like about this framework is the fact that it's broken down into all these different process areas. It allows you to scope the project slowly. It allows you to focus on different areas. It allows you to engage different parts of the business, specifically stepping through what those processes in that process area should entail, what they should look like. This framework really gives us the ability to break the project down into smaller segments and allows you to focus really, step it up into phases. It really helps you get a lot of success and easy in your IGA projects, really. Okay, so I mean, let's just go ahead and show you guys the framework, what it looks like, and then we'll talk through some of these process areas, Al.
Okay, perfect.
So as you can see on the screen there, I mean, we didn't build big presentations, but we'll share this with you guys as well. But really the framework is divided up into these different process areas. And this is really best practice from an IGA perspective. It's really Gartner focused as well. So if you start looking at some of the big vendors out there, they will all more or less subscribe to these processes and process areas within their technology. That's what makes this framework so brilliant. The very first process area, identity lifecycle management, consists of 3 individual processes, calling onboarding identity, changing an identity, and offboarding an identity. And I think from a MIM environment, this is really something that most customers have focused on for quite a while already.
So I mean, I have seen some of this that you guys use, so the frameworks that you use. So I haven't seen this framework in a while. So I'm looking at it now, and I'm kind of looking at the various areas here to kind of try to get my head around it. And I see that I think you're spot on. When you look at identity lifecycle management, I think that speaks to the the ILM, the onboarding, the offboarding, and the transitioning of people inside the business. So the framework, correct me if I'm wrong here, the framework, what does it provide in those sections? Does it give you, obviously it tells me that I need to focus on those areas as a business. Obviously I need to figure out how I onboard staff members and different types of people, I suppose, how I go about changing and transferring them, and then how I offboard them. But does it delve deeper into that? I mean, what does the framework give you when you delve into each of those ICL processes there?
Yeah, that's a good question, Al. I think, if you the framework is not just a picture, there's a huge document behind this. And identity lifecycle management as a business process area, the framework allows you to delve into each one of those sub-processes, and it looks at best practice in the industry that you might be in. So manufacturing, pharmaceutical, e-commerce, whatever your industry is, it will look at what's the best practice from an IGA perspective in that area. So when we talk about onboarding an identity and you're in the education environment, it would specifically talk about onboarding staff members, onboarding students and learners. How do you facilitate the onboarding process of alumni or ex-professors who want to come back and do research, as an example, right? In a IT environment or a service provider environment, it would focus on how do you onboard third-party contractors to come into your environment and do work in your environment. So really the onboarding of an identity is multiple different types of an identity. And the framework reminds you that in this industry, you should be looking at these types of identities, and you should be looking at asking these questions in your business around how do you currently onboard that identity? How does that identity, what is required from a legal governance and compliance perspective to be able to onboard an identity? What type of information should you capture? What type of information should you try and avoid? Right? In today's day and age, GDPR, POPI, you want to know a lot about a person, but you want to know enough that you can utilize in your environment that supports the process and nothing more. You don't want to know blood type, as an example. So really the framework gives you guidance. It asks questions and allows you to ask those questions to a business representative in that department or that part of the business to extract that information to then be able to document what that process should look like.
Okay.
It also gives you a good example of what a standard best practice process is today, really. Okay. So you might not have to reinvent the wheel completely. You can use that out of the box standard process in the technology platform that you deploy, and adjust your business process slightly to work towards that. Alternatively, you can utilize and document your business process and then implement that in your IGA platform.
Okay, but that's really interesting. But I think if I'm a identity owner at a business now and I look at this, I think there's two questions that I already have. Thinking about the previous discussion we had about the stakeholders and the ownership. Firstly, I think, does the process help me to figure out who all the stakeholders are that's involved in each of these business areas and help us to figure out who maybe should take accountability? I think that's the one thing. And then the second glaring question is, if this is now a vendor framework, I mean, is this something that's only specific to this vendor now? I think you said it's vendor agnostic, but I mean, how agnostic is it really? Is it a question of this obviously fits this vendor really well, but can this really be translated very easily into any other vendor or a different technology area?
That's good questions, Al. That's exactly why we subscribe to this framework, and I love the Almero guys for developing this. Right, it is subscriptive in terms of what stakeholders should be involved in what part of these processes. That really helps you identify from an onboarding perspective the following departments: HR, legal, those type of departments should be involved. Typically, you would get access to the HR manager. So the framework really gives you guidance around who, in which process the stakeholders should be that you engage with in business. Your second part of the question is if it's really that technology agnostic. Yes, it is. I mean, this framework specifically, if you go through it, it will not mention a standard process that can only be delivered through one technology. Yes, the lingo might change a bit when you start looking at vendors like SailPoint or Quest or some of these other vendors. The lingo might refer to a resource as an entitlement, or an entitlement as a resource, or as a permission. So they change a little bit, but really the process is it's business focused. That's the right thing, right? You can engage through with business, and you can have a honest and open discussion with them around the processes in their environment. And then once you've got this documented and you understand what it is that is required, you can break this down into different sections and then go and find the right technology vendor to be able to implement this. And any company out there will take what you've documented through this framework, and they will be able to implement it no matter what platform you eventually decide to use, right? That's what I think makes this framework work very well. And I mean, in previous projects, we've used this to help business unlock the understanding of IGA. Let's face it, it is a big beast. When you talk to a CIO about IGA, it's a really difficult discussion because it covers quite a big area. With the advent now of identity fabric, which includes all your other identity-centric tools and services and security tools, MFA, multi-factors authentication, and just-in-time permissions and privileged account management, all these other tools that come into play that make up your fabric. It's really difficult for them to scope and understand what it is that we are going to do in your environment when you talk about IGA. And if you show this picture to a CIO and you go, this is our project, this is the scope. We've got backing documentation around every single one of these processes. We've discussed that with your business. We've analyzed it. We've documented the requirements around each one of these sub-processes. And we are ready to go and find a technology platform, scope the project, and start delivering those. If you do just this, you will be 90% of the way to implementing a proper and successful IGA project. That's what makes this really attractive.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think we can... I mean, just looking at all these blocks, I presume that we can take a lot of time to talk about individual things in here. But I think what would be interesting to me is if we just take let's take 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes and just go through each of those main blocks and kind of give me an idea of what each of these, competency or process areas really focus on.
Because sure.
I can make assumptions about a few of them, but I think it'll be interesting to quickly get an idea of what each of them are.
It's really it's really easy if you start looking at the framework and the documentation that backs this up. But on a high level, if you look at those 4 process areas on the left-hand side: identity lifecycle management, access management, business alignment, and then finally security breach, they are really supported by governance, administration, and auditing on your right-hand side. So your governance, administration, and auditing processes run within each of these process areas and sub-processes. As an example, if you look at change identity, really change identity is when an identity moves between departments, right? So that is a simple process, but in the back end, business need to understand that when an identity moves between departments, they really change job title, they change function, which means their entitlements need to change along with it. But not just change automatically, it also needs to be reviewed and attested. So if you start looking at governance, performing that attestation, the review of your assignments when you leave one role and move into another role, the auditing behind the audit compliance, and to be able to provide your auditor a report of that entire process, who reviewed it, when it was done. And then, of course, managing that process automatically. That moves into your access management layer, fulfilling that provisioning into those connected systems automatically. So the framework, although there's individual blocks, change identity, offboard identity, they really interlink between all the other supported process areas as well. If we talk about something like access request and provisioning as an example, this is really a sensitive topic of discussion for most customers, because most customers have got a tool in place or a service in place where employees do access management currently. Think of ServiceNow as an example.
Yeah, ITSM systems or something like that.
Yeah, ITSM systems really, and this is really a contentious discussion when it comes, because the customer will go, but we've already got ServiceNow in place. We've already got ITSM tools in place. But the IGA framework gets you thinking that in an access request process, you need to apply governance, auditing, compliance. You need to be able to enforce policy if you think of segregation of duty policies. You need to be able to do a review of peer access. So typically you're a project manager, you should be requesting and be granted typical project manager roles. You can't suddenly go and request domain admins or a financial creditor approver role or something like that. It really needs to align, and that analytics is discussed and addressed inside the access management process area. It gets you thinking around, how do I integrate these systems to be able to do SOD as part of my request access process, not just after the fact. Business alignment, with the advent of AI today, the analysis of who's got access in your environment, why they have access, really brings a whole new level of visibility to business owners. Suddenly we can see by view of region, by view of department, by view of behavior, who's got access to what, do they use those roles, how is that applied, how can we convert that access into a policy. Simple example, in the past, we would go and define roles up front in an enterprise before we go and design the roles and deploy them as part of your IGA solution. Usually we would end up with more roles than positions in the company because there's just so many pigmentations, right? Now, what we do is we collect all your data and we tell you typically who's got access to what, and we group people. You can see all the people in this region in the company have got access to these similar roles. And out of that information, you can start developing roles and policy and put that into a context. So business alignment as part of the framework, again, it asks those questions, it gets you thinking. And once you've got the technology deployed, it allows you to make that data visible and reuse it in a role or a policy mechanism.
That's really cool. I think if I just think about all the projects that I've done in the past where the promise of role-based access control is, I mean, it's a good idea. That the practical implementation of it sometimes falls a little bit short, in the sense that I see businesses they have the ability to define some roles, and maybe they do some broad roles initially, but then kind of as the roles kind of converge and get more specific, you always have this 20 or 30% that never really is covered by roles and always ends up with some help desk call or something that somebody has to look at. So
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, and again, I mean, IGA projects is not a fire and forget we all know that it's not even a program. It's a journey. It's a new service. You cannot just do it and leave it.
Yeah.
The framework, if you utilize the framework properly, the back end of this will give you a document around your business process for each of these process areas. So you will have a as is to be gap analysis document process or document library that you can fall back to. This must be reviewed every other year as your business grows and moves, and it allows you to adjust and modify processes within the framework very quickly and easily, because you can go back to business and see, is it required? Should we change this? We bought these two companies, the process should be updated. And again, if you look at an auditor will always ask you for some sort of document or proof that the process works the way that you say it will work. So if you utilize the framework, out of this, you have a huge document library that gives you all the artifacts that you need to be able to give to the auditor and go, this is the way that we've designed it. And if you then go and look at the platform, this is the way that it's being operated. Those two match up, you pass your audit. A lot of the times people jump to the technology part and they really get stuck in the identity lifecycle management process area.
Yeah,
the focus jumps into provisioning, onboarding and offboarding. And around that, they start doing a little bit of roles and access management. But that's where they get stuck, really. They never get the chance to move into the business alignment or security breach area and focus around your governance and auditing abilities. And we've seen that many times. The framework allows us to give those individual responsible process areas to different people so that they can apply the right focus on it. You get the operations who will typically play in the top two business process areas, right? Mm-hmm. You get the governance, risk, and compliance that will probably fit more around the right-hand side of the framework, and they get involved there. They really love seeing those reports and understanding how auditing is applied. Security breach is also something that your security SOC or your service provider who implements and manages your SOC might be very interested in. Understanding what's the business process around a breach. How do we manage that breach? How do we notify, deactivate, and remediate in that environment, right? So the framework gets you thinking around all the topics and different processes that you would have to think about in an IGA project. It really helped us a lot in the past. And a lot of the time, companies today, they utilize this framework to put all the cards on the table and then go out and go and find a suitable technology vendor.
I think that's an interesting application. I can think back of one or two times that we've had interesting technology platform conversations with customers, specifically when they were either more identity lifecycle focused, and then they have an idea of that they would like to do some other IGA things, but they don't really understand the implication of it. And I've seen you use this framework in the past where we kind of map technology on top of it to kind of say, oh, well, okay, one of the things that we did a lot of in the past was Microsoft Identity Manager projects. And that really focuses a lot on, I can see that focuses well in the identity lifecycle management competence area, and maybe a little bit in the access management area. But when I look at all these other areas, I can see, okay, that's where there's a big shift in the focus of a pure lifecycle management product set or competence set to something that is more governance focused. So I can kind of see the difference here between, I don't want to mention vendors' names, but I mean, I can see the difference between IGA vendors and IAM vendors. But it's also interesting because I can kind of see how having a vendor focus, if you're in a specific cloud provider, if you're in Microsoft or you're in Amazon or you're in GCP, many of these tools exist in these. I'm just kind of confronted by all this, the bleed that's in these providers. So you know, you've got a lot of the providers tell you that they do these things now, but you have got vendors like CyberArk that's bringing in identity features. So there's like this whole kind of Venn diagram of all the vendors that's kind of moving into this area. But looking at it, I'm kind of thinking of, I see like a bunch of identity owners in my head now that, I mean, half of their job is trying to define this for their business, trying to say, okay, hang on, what do we really want? When do we want it? And what's the priority of it? And how do we get there? And then you choose tech to support it.
Exactly.
Oftentimes what happens is we get, shiny eye syndrome or something. We see glistening things and like crows, we run to tech and we just pick up the technology that is in front of us. And if we look at the tech, maybe we do 1 or 2 POCs between different tech, and then we choose the nicest tech of the two, and then we deploy something. And then I think you get stuck where you don't necessarily get everything rolled out. So I really since I've seen their initial versions of this is really fledged out. I think I should go look at the document again. I think we're almost out of time. So I wanted to ask 1 or 2 more things. I think the one is the framework. Okay, so we've said the framework is agnostic. Is the framework available for free? Is that something somebody can just get themselves? And if they need to get it or they want to have a look at it, where can they get it?
Yes, well, I'll ask Maurits to put the links for us in the comments section. The framework is free; anybody can download it, and
Okay.
100% technology agnostic. Armada have built their product set based on this framework, and it is mapped back to business processes in their platform. But the framework itself and the document, like we said before, is 100% technology agnostic. There's nothing in this framework or these processes that you would not be able to do across any IGA vendor and map to their capabilities and technologies. And you touched on something earlier that I just want to quickly add on to, Al. The fabric of the identity fabric, as they call it now, where you've got your PAM solutions and just-in-time access and Microsoft and Google and everybody else jumping on the governance bandwagon and promising governance capabilities. Really, the framework helps you set aside which technologies will be your primary focus deliverer in that process area. You can really get to a place of best of breed for this. Security breach is an example. Utilizing something like CyberArk there for just-in-time access or privileged account management. It doesn't have to be the only solution that you now have to choose CyberArk to do everything else, right? It really allows you to say, well, CyberArk will play well in this area of the framework. I need to integrate that into other areas of the framework to make this framework, to make IGA work for my business. The framework helps you understand that and frame it as such. So, there's lots to learn in the framework. And we'll give you guys the links to the framework in the comment. Please go and download it. And if you have any questions, ping us. I mean, we like having these type of discussions with you guys. I don't know. Al, anything else from your side?
No, I don't want to draw this out. It's really interesting. I can see my security officer hat is going mad because I can see that this fits nicely into the broader framework of how you look at who's got access to what, why do they have that access, what are they doing with that access, I think is a completely other part of the discussion. So identity breach in this framework does touch on aspects that you would look at your SIEM and SOAR environments. So I can see that there's a larger security picture, but this falls in, I think, an area of that world which sometimes just becomes a small little blob of like access management. Sometimes we see it as just, we need to manage access.
Yeah.
And then customers are a little bit confused as to, okay, well, how do you tackle this? Because there's a lot of stuff that talks about the broader framework, but not necessarily stuff in each of these blocks. So
exactly,
really interesting stuff. I like it.
Yeah, Microsoft just recently did exactly the same thing with their Zero Trust framework that they brought out. It gets you thinking around the areas in your business that you need to address, the processes involved, and then you go to the technology that could help you solve that. So go utilize frameworks, guys. It will help. It'll make your life easier. And with that, thanks, guys. Thanks for attending another episode of Securely Speaking. Let's see how this plays out.
Perfect. Thanks, Quinton. I appreciate the conversation. We'll have another one soon.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, leave a like and subscribe to stay tuned for our upcoming sessions. We'd also love to hear from you, so leave a comment in the comment section, or alternatively, reach out to us on www.integralis.coza/contact us. See you next time.